Down on his luck, mechanic gives a ride to a hitchhiker unaware she's a runaway millionaire looking for freedom. "Stop, please!" Nash Walker froze with his hand on the truck door, turning toward the voice cutting through the howling wind. The girl was running toward him, stumbling across the cracked, dust-blown lot like a leaf battered by a storm. Jeans ripped at the knees, sneakers caked in dirt, a too-thin jacket whipping around her frame. Her face was pale under the grime, and her eyes, wide and frantic, locked onto him like he was her last hope. "I need a ride, anywhere, please," she panted, skidding to a halt a few feet away. Nash frowned, one foot half inside his beat-up truck. The day had already been bad, 3 unpaid jobs and an empty gas tank, and now this. "You in some kind of trouble?" he asked, voice rough from disuse. "No," she said too quickly. Then, softer, "Yes, maybe, please. I just need to get out of here." He scanned the empty road behind her, the endless stretch of cracked highway winding back toward town. Nothing, no one. But the way she kept looking over her shoulder made his gut tighten. "You got a name?" he asked. "Tessa," she said. She hugged herself tightly, as if trying to hold herself together. "Tessa what?" he pressed. She hesitated, then muttered, "Reed." Nash sighed, weighing his options. She was clearly terrified, clearly desperate. He knew better than to get involved in other people's messes. But something about her, something raw and real, made it impossible for him to turn away. "Get in," he said, jerking his thumb toward the passenger seat. Tessa did not waste a second. She yanked the door open and threw herself inside, slamming it shut behind her. Nash climbed in after her, the truck creaking under his weight, and started the engine. The old beast coughed and groaned but came to life. They pulled out onto the empty highway without another word, the town shrinking behind them in the rear-view mirror. For a long time there was only the sound of the wind whistling through the cracked windows and the low rumble of the tires against the battered road. Nash cut a glance at her. She was curled into herself, staring blankly out the window, hands fidgeting nervously in her lap. "You planning to tell me what you're running from?" he asked. "No," she said tightly. Not exactly reassuring. She turned toward him then, eyes shining with something that looked a lot like fear, or maybe sorrow. "I just need to get away," she said. "I can pay you. I have money." Nash laughed without humor. "Lady, if you had any idea how many times I've heard that." She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a crumpled wad of bills, real money, more than he had seen in months. His hands tightened on the steering wheel. This was not a casual runaway. Whatever she was mixed up in, it was deep. Maybe deeper than he wanted to know. He jerked his head toward the glove box. "Put it in there, out of sight." Tessa hesitated, then opened the glove box and shoved the money inside. She hesitated again, as if debating whether to say something else, then closed it and leaned back in her seat. The truck rumbled over a pothole, jolting them both. Nash kept his eyes on the road, but his mind was racing. "What did you do?" he asked quietly. Tessa stiffened. "Nothing, I swear. You expect me to believe that? I did not steal anything. I did not hurt anyone. I could not stay." There was something in her voice, something broken and honest, that made him believe her despite every instinct screaming at him not to. "Fine," he said, "but you better hope no one comes looking for you. I have enough problems without adding fugitives to the list." "I'm not a fugitive," she whispered. Nash snorted. "Sure sounds like you are." The miles slipped away under their wheels. Tessa closed her eyes, her body relaxing just a fraction, though the tension never fully left her. Nash glanced at her again, studying the lines of exhaustion and fear etched into her young face. He knew he should drop her off at the next town, let her be someone else's problem. But something deep inside him, something stubborn and old, whispered that he was already too involved. The road stretched out ahead of them, empty and endless. Behind them, unseen but inevitable, trouble brewed like a storm on the horizon. And Nash Walker, against all better judgment, kept driving straight into it. The sun was dipping low, casting long shadows across the cracked highway. Nash drove in silence, the engine humming a steady, tired tune beneath them. Every so often he would glance at the girl beside him, Tessa Reed, who sat stiffly in the passenger seat, her arms locked around her knees like she was bracing against some invisible blow. She had not said much since they left the edge of town. Neither had he. The silence between them was thick, not comfortable, but not hostile either. It was the silence of two people who had too much to say and no idea how to start. "Where you headed?" Nash finally asked, his voice rough from disuse. Tessa shrugged without looking at him. "Anywhere but back there." He chewed the inside of his cheek, considering that answer. Not exactly helpful, but he supposed it was honest enough. "You got family?" He tried again. Another shrug. "Not the kind that matters," Nash grunted. He knew that kind of family, blood in name only. He had left his behind years ago and never looked back. The gas gauge dipped dangerously low, the needle flirting with empty. Nash muttered a curse and steered toward the next exit, a dusty little stop with a single pump and a convenience store that looked like it had not been cleaned since the Reagan administration. He pulled up beside the pump, killed the engine, and slid out of the truck. The wind hit him hard, carrying the sharp metallic scent of an approaching storm. He topped off the tank quickly, glancing around out of habit. The station was empty except for a battered sedan parked on the far side, windows darkened. He felt Tessa's eyes on him as he worked, but she stayed inside, hugging herself tightly. When he finished, he climbed back into the truck and reached across to the glove box, intending to grab the crumpled map he kept for emergencies. He popped it open without thinking. A thick, yellowed envelope tumbled out, landing with a soft thud on the floor. Nash froze. It was not just thick, it was heavy, bulging. He could see stacks of $100 bills peeking from the torn edge, and tucked behind the cash were several sheets of paper, neatly folded, marked with legal-looking seals and fine print. His heart gave a slow, deliberate thud. He glanced at Tessa. She was staring out the window, pretending not to see, but he could tell from the rigid set of her shoulders that she knew exactly what had just happened. Nash stooped, scooped up the envelope, and shoved it back into the glove box without a word. He closed it carefully, as if sealing away something toxic. Neither of them said anything. He turned the key in the ignition, the engine growling back to life, and pulled out of the gas station, back onto the open road. For a long time he just drove, the wheels eating up mile after dusty mile. But inside his head, the questions were piling up fast. Who the hell was this girl, really? Why did she have that much money, and what were those documents? Contracts? Deeds? Something worse? Nash knew trouble when he saw it, and he knew it was sitting less than 2 feet away from him, wrapped in a dirty jacket and shaking silently. He tapped his fingers against the steering wheel, glancing at her again. She looked small, almost fragile, but there was a stubborn set to her jaw that said she would not break easily. "You lied to me," he said quietly. Tessa flinched but did not answer. "You said you were not a criminal." "I am not," she said, her voice low but firm. Nash barked out a humorless laugh. "Yeah, because carrying a brick of cash and a stack of shady papers around sure looks normal." She turned to face him then, her eyes blazing. "You do not know what you are talking about." "No," he snapped back, "then maybe you should enlighten me." Tessa's hands tightened into fists on her lap. For a moment it looked like she might say something, might explain, but then she just shook her head and turned away again, staring out at the endless horizon. "Trust is earned," she said quietly, "and you have not earned mine." Nash clenched his jaw, biting back the dozen retorts that sprang to his lips. Fine, if that was how she wanted it. But his mind was already racing ahead, calculating risks, possibilities, exits. He needed to be smart, careful. Whatever she was tangled up in, it was not small. People did not carry that kind of cash unless they were running from something or someone very dangerous. And now he was caught in the middle. The truck sped down the empty highway, the sky darkening into bruised purple as the storm gathered strength. Lightning flickered on the horizon, silent and ominous. Nash tightened his grip on the wheel and kept driving, every instinct screaming at him that this road would not lead anywhere good. But he had made a choice when he let her into his truck, and whatever came next, he would have to see it through. The rain hammered the metal roof of the abandoned rest stop as Nash Walker leaned back in the booth, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the storm outside. The place was a ghost town, battered vending machines, broken picnic tables, a single flickering light. Across from him, Tessa was curled up, soaked and shivering, half asleep after hours of tense silence. Nash's mind churned. He could hand her over to the nearest sheriff, claim a reward big enough to fix his life. People did not chase runaways with this much force unless they were valuable. It would be easy, simple, clean. Then she stirred, murmuring in her sleep, her voice raw with fear. "No, Daddy, please. I do not want to marry him." Nash stiffened, leaning forward as she whimpered, "I just want to be free." Pieces clicked into place. "Daddy, marriage, freedom, Tessa," he said softly. She jolted awake, confusion and fear flashing across her face. "Tell me who you really are," Nash pressed. "I told you," she whispered, "Tessa Reed." "No," Nash said, voice calm but firm, "not really." She looked ready to bolt, but there was nowhere to go, only him, only the storm. "You mentioned your father," he said. "Marriage, explain." Tessa's hands shook as she pushed damp hair from her face. "My real name is Tessa Whitmore," she whispered. Nash's gut tightened. He knew that name, Whitmore Industries, skyscrapers, private jets, billion-dollar contracts. "My father is Nathaniel Whitmore," she continued. "He arranged a marriage for me. To merge companies, secure power. I was just a pawn," she hugged herself tightly, voice breaking. "I refused. I wanted to live my own life. He told me I did not have a choice." The rain battered the windows. Nash felt the gravity of it settle on him. "So you ran," he said. She nodded. "I stole cash, grabbed whatever documents I could find. I thought maybe it would buy me time, maybe leverage." "And now he is hunting you," Nash said grimly. Tessa met his gaze with raw, trembling fear. "My father does not lose," she whispered. "If he finds me, he will make me disappear." Nash rubbed a hand over his face, cursing under his breath. This was bigger than anything he had wanted to step into. It was life or death. He looked at her, this girl who had risked everything to choose freedom over a golden cage. She would rather sleep in a crumbling rest stop during a storm than return to a life of lies. Something shifted inside him, deep and undeniable. He could walk away, he could wash his hands of it all, but he would not. "All right, Tessa Whitmore," he said steadily. "Looks like you are stuck with me a little longer." For the first time since he had met her, she smiled. It was small, worn, but heartbreakingly real. The rain kept battering the world outside, but inside, in the battered booth of a forgotten rest stop, Nash Walker found something he had not felt in a long time, a reason to stay. The rain had eased to a steady drizzle by the time Nash and Tessa finished a dinner of stale crackers and warm soda from a vending machine. Nash leaned back in the booth, scanning the parking lot through the window's cracked glass. The highway was empty except for the mist curling off the asphalt and the faint glow of a few dim streetlights. Tessa shifted uneasily in her seat. "Do you think they are still looking for me?" she asked, her voice low. "They're not the type to give up easy," Nash said, his tone grim, "especially if your father's pulling the strings." Tessa opened her mouth to say something else, but Nash stiffened, his senses snapping into high alert. Headlights cut through the mist, two black SUVs pulling into the lot side by side. Their engines rumbled like distant thunder, even at idle. Nash cursed under his breath. "Stay calm," he muttered. Three men stepped out of the first SUV, heavyset, dressed in dark jackets, their movements sharp and coordinated. Another two from the second vehicle. They spread out, eyes scanning the lot, moving toward the building. Tessa went rigid across from him, her hands trembling under the table. "Look at me," Nash said sharply. She turned, wide-eyed. "You're my girlfriend," he said quickly. "Got it? You are traveling with me. No stories, no hesitation." She nodded frantically. The door creaked open, and the men stepped inside, shaking off rain. One of them, taller than the rest, with a hard jaw and cold eyes, approached the counter and addressed the bored-looking cashier. Nash strained to listen. "Seen a girl? About 20, brown hair, traveling alone?" the tall man asked. The cashier shrugged. "I ain't seen nobody but them two," he said, jerking his thumb toward Nash and Tessa. The tall man turned, his gaze locking onto them. Nash wrapped an arm casually around Tessa's shoulders, pulling her closer. She flinched, then forced herself to lean into him, her body stiff as a board. The man approached, his boots thudding heavily on the grimy tile. "Evening," he said. "Evening," Nash replied coolly. "You folks from around here?" Nash shook his head. "Passing through, heading south." The man's eyes narrowed slightly, flicking from Nash to Tessa. "Mind if I ask your girlfriend a few questions?" Nash smiled thinly. "Yeah, I mind." The tension between them crackled like a live wire. "Relax," the man said, flashing a badge. "Private security, not police." Nash recognized the move. Intimidation through authority. He had seen it 100 times. "We're looking for a missing person," the man continued. "Her family's worried sick." Nash tightened his grip on Tessa. "Sorry, pal. We're not interested in getting involved. You got a picture or something?" The man hesitated, then pulled out a phone, showing a grainy image. It was Tessa. Nash cursed silently. He gave a casual glance at the phone and shook his head. "Does not ring a bell." The man stared at him, studying him carefully. Tessa kept her face buried against Nash's shoulder, pretending to be half asleep. Another man entered from outside, nodding discreetly to the tall one. Nash caught the movement, reinforcements closing in. Time to move. "Come on, baby," Nash said, rising to his feet and tugging Tessa up with him. "We should get back on the road." "Wait a second," the tall man said, stepping into their path. Nash smiled grimly. "I said," he growled low enough for only Tessa to hear, "when I move, you run. Got it?" She barely nodded. In one swift motion, Nash shoved the table hard into the man's legs, sending him staggering backward. Shouts erupted. Nash grabbed Tessa's hand and bolted for the door. Gunmetal flashed as one of the men reached inside his jacket. Nash did not think, he just moved. They sprinted through the rain-soaked lot toward the truck. His boots pounded the asphalt, water splashing up in sheets. "Keys!" Tessa cried. "Already out." Nash fumbled with them, cursing as they slipped once in his wet hands, then jammed the right one into the lock. The heavy thud of footsteps closed in behind them. "Go!" Nash barked, yanking the door open and shoving Tessa inside. He vaulted in after her, slammed the door, and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine coughed, sputtered. "Come on," he snarled, slamming the dashboard with his palm. The engine roared to life just as one of the men slammed a hand against the truck bed. Nash gunned the gas, tires squealing as they fishtailed out of the lot. Gunshots cracked through the night, bullets shattering the rear window in a spray of glass. Tessa screamed, ducking low. Nash swerved onto the main road, fishtailing again, but managed to straighten out. He pressed the pedal to the floor, the speedometer climbing fast. In the rearview mirror, he saw the black SUVs tear out of the lot after them, headlights bouncing in the rain. "Hang on," he yelled. The truck thundered down the deserted highway, skidding on the wet pavement. Nash yanked the wheel hard, taking a sharp turn down a narrow side road he barely remembered. The SUVs overshot, missing the turn by seconds. Heart hammering, Nash gunned the truck deeper into the back roads, weaving between potholes and debris. After 10 agonizing minutes of silence, no headlights followed them. They were alone. Nash pulled onto a dirt track and killed the headlights, letting the engine idle softly. Tessa was shaking so hard he could hear her teeth chattering. "You okay?" he asked, voice rough. She nodded jerkily, wiping rain and tears from her face. Nash sat back, breathing hard, his hands still locked on the wheel. He could have left her. He could have handed her over and walked away clean. But he knew now, deep in his bones, that he was in this, no turning back. He turned to her, meeting her wide, terrified eyes. "Wherever you need to go," he said, "I am getting you there." Tessa stared at him, and for the first time, a flicker of real trust passed between them. Outside, the rain began to ease, leaving the world slick and shimmering under the bruised sky. They had escaped for now, but the chase had only just begun. The abandoned cabin groaned under the weight of the storm. Nash Walker shoved the swollen door shut and wedged a chair beneath the handle. The place reeked of mildew, but it was dry and hidden. Tessa Reed collapsed onto a battered couch, wrapping herself in a threadbare blanket. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow. She had barely spoken since they fled the rest stop. Nash coaxed a fire to life in the rusted stove, its weak glow doing little against the cold. They needed rest, a plan. But first, Nash needed answers. He knelt beside the duffel bag, unzipping it to reveal the thick envelope she had shoved into the glove box. A glance at Tessa showed her staring blankly at the fire. Nash sat on the floor and pulled out the envelope. Inside, stacks of cash bundled with rubber bands, and beneath it, papers. He unfolded the first sheet: legal documents, business contracts, memos stamped confidential. Most carried the Whitmore Industries logo. At first glance, it seemed like standard corporate noise, but as he skimmed page after page, patterns emerged. Shell companies, offshore accounts, laundered money through fake charities and real estate scams. Nash's gut twisted. This was not just corporate greed, it was criminal. Federal-level crimes, fraud, racketeering, money laundering. He found a handwritten ledger, names, wire transfers, dates, signatures. A bomb waiting to explode. "You knew," Nash said quietly, lifting his gaze to her. Tessa flinched, but said nothing. "You were not just running from a marriage," he said, holding up the damning papers. "You were running from this." Slowly, Tessa turned toward him, her eyes shimmering in the firelight. "I did not know at first," she whispered. "I just grabbed what I could. I thought it would buy me time, leverage." She clutched the blanket tighter. "But when I finally looked," she trailed off, pain clear in her voice. Nash shoved the documents back into the envelope. "This," he said grimly, "could destroy your father. Whitmore Industries, everything." Tessa nodded, her hands trembling. "And you thought you could outrun this?" "I thought if I got far enough, maybe he would stop chasing me," she said bitterly. "I was wrong." Nash leaned back against the wall, feeling the enormity of it weigh down on him. He had thought he was helping a scared girl dodge an overbearing father. Instead, he realized he was sitting on a powder keg that could get both of them killed. "If they find out, we have this." Nash shook his head. "We are dead." Tessa closed her eyes, her face pale with fear. "We have to destroy it," Nash said suddenly. Tessa's eyes flew open. "No, it is the only thing keeping me alive." "It is a damn target on your back," Nash snapped. "You think your father will negotiate? He is not trying to scare you back home, Tessa. He is trying to bury you." The fire popped in the stove, shadows shifting across the cabin's cracked walls. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Tessa's voice broke the silence. "Then what do we do?" Nash pushed himself to his feet, pacing across the creaky floor. "We do not run blind anymore," he said. "We find a place they will not expect, lay low, and when the time is right, we use this." Tessa frowned. "Use it?" Nash's jaw tightened. "We take it public, expose everything, bring them down." Tessa looked terrified, but also, Nash thought, maybe a little relieved. "They will come after us," she whispered. "They already are," Nash said. "At least this way we fight back." Tessa gripped the blanket so hard her knuckles whitened. Then, slowly, she nodded. Nash knelt in front of her, meeting her gaze. "I am in this," he said, voice steady. "All the way." A tear slid down Tessa's cheek, but she wiped it away fiercely and nodded again. Outside, the storm began to die down, the rain easing into a soft whisper. Inside the broken cabin, a fragile, dangerous alliance was forged, one born not of fear but of defiance. Whatever lay ahead, running, fighting, surviving, they would face it together. Nash Walker had made his choice, and there was no turning back. The first light of dawn bled weakly through the broken windows of the cabin, casting long shadows over the cracked floorboards. The fire in the stove had long since died to cold embers. Nash Walker stirred on the warped wooden floor, groaning softly as stiff muscles protested every movement. He sat up slowly, rubbing a hand over his face. The world outside was eerily still, wrapped in a heavy mist. It took him a moment to notice the silence inside the cabin was different, hollow, too empty. His heart sank. "Tessa?" he called out, his voice raw in the morning air. No answer. He scrambled to his feet, scanning the room. Her blanket lay crumpled on the couch. Her jacket was gone. So was the duffel bag. So was the envelope full of cash and damning documents. A sick feeling twisted in his gut. He lunged for the door, yanking the chair away and stumbling outside into the damp morning. The truck was gone. Mud tracks in the soft earth led away from the cabin, 2 deep ruts carved by tires desperate to escape. Nash stood there for a long moment, the mist clinging to his clothes, his breath coming in shallow, angry bursts. She had taken his only means of transport, his money, his one chance to expose the truth, and she had left him. He kicked a loose rock across the clearing, fury boiling up from somewhere deep inside. He should have known better. He should have known this would happen. Trust was a fool's currency, and he had been bankrupt long ago. Stupid, he muttered. Damn stupid! He turned in a slow circle, scanning the trees, the empty road beyond. But she was gone. Hours ahead by now. Gone without so much as a note. Gone without giving him a choice. He clenched his fists until his nails bit into his palms, but beneath the anger, sharp and cutting, there was something worse. Disappointment. It lodged deep in his chest, heavier than any betrayal he had known before. He had believed her. He had believed in her. Not just because of the envelope full of dirty secrets, not just because of the danger chasing them both. Because of her. Because somewhere along the line, without him even realizing it, Tessa Reed had gotten under his skin, and it terrified him more than he cared to admit. Nash paced the clearing like a caged animal, fighting the urge to punch something, to scream into the misty dawn. None of it would change the facts. She was gone. She had not trusted him enough to stay. And maybe, he thought bitterly, she had been right. He was no hero. He was a broke, battered mechanic with more regrets than prospects. What had he really offered her? A longer, slower road to ruin? Still, a part of him, damn it, the stupid part, hoped she had been wrong, that somewhere deep down she had known he would never have betrayed her. He sank onto the old porch step, head in his hands, the cold seeping into his bones. He thought about getting up, walking away, pretending the last few days had never happened. He thought about letting her go, but the image of her face, terrified, determined, fragile, and fierce all at once, burned behind his eyes. Nash exhaled a long, ragged breath and stood up slowly. If she thought she could outrun him, she had another thing coming. He was not giving up that easy. Not on her. Not yet. The mud had preserved her tire tracks well enough. They carved a clear, desperate path down the dirt road leading back toward the highway. Nash started walking, boots sinking into the wet earth with each determined step. The mist swirled around him, cold and clinging. Ahead, somewhere, Tessa was running. Maybe she thought it was safer to face the world alone. Maybe she thought she had no choice. But Nash Walker had made his choice, back in that rest stop, in that abandoned cabin, the moment he had looked into her eyes and seen not just fear but hope. He was not letting her fight this battle alone, not if he had anything to say about it. He adjusted the worn backpack slung over his shoulder, the only thing she had not taken, and set his jaw. Whatever it took, he would find her, and this time he would make damn sure she knew she was not alone anymore. The sun had barely risen when Nash found the tracks, faint tire impressions in the wet dirt, broken branches marking a crash through the tree. He followed them with grim focus, ignoring the cold seeping into his boots. Every step hammered home the truth. Tessa was out there, and she needed him. An abandoned sedan lay in a ditch, Tessa's torn jacket snagged on a nearby branch. Nash's jaw tightened. They had her. Up ahead, hidden among the trees, he spotted a cluster of decaying buildings, rusted metal, crumbling concrete, a forgotten industrial site. The perfect hideout. Through the battered binoculars he had lifted along the way, Nash counted 2 men guarding the entrance, rifles slung carelessly. He could almost feel Tessa's fear behind those walls. His hands curled into fists. Nearby, a service truck sat abandoned, keys dangling from the ignition. Without hesitation, Nash climbed in, started the engine, and slammed the gear into drive. The truck roared down the dirt path, bouncing wildly. The guards barely had time to react as Nash burst through the trees, horn blaring. One dove out of the way, the other scrambled behind a concrete block. Nash yanked the wheel, skidding into the flimsy fence and smashing through. The truck crashed against a rusted storage container with a screech of metal. He leapt out, adrenaline surging, sprinting toward the main building. Shouts rang out, boots pounded gravel, guns were drawn, bullets tore through the air as Nash ducked behind a stack of pallets. "Find him!" someone roared. Nash grabbed a chunk of rebar and hurled it through a far window. The crash drew the guards' attention, and Nash bolted through a side door. Inside was a labyrinth of rotting offices and sagging walls. He moved fast, keeping low, listening. A muffled cry cut through the chaos. He followed the sound, heart hammering, until he found her. Tessa was tied to a chair under a single bare bulb, bruised and bloodied. A man towered over her, shouting. Rage exploded inside Nash. He charged, slamming into the man hard enough to knock them both over. They grappled violently, fists and elbows flying. The man was bigger, stronger. Nash took a blow to the jaw that left his vision swimming. The man reached for his gun. Nash snatched up a broken chair leg and swung with everything he had. It connected with a sickening crack. The man dropped, unmoving. Gasping, Nash staggered to his feet, blood dripping from a cut on his forehead. "Tessa!" he rasped, rushing to her. She blinked up at him, relief and disbelief washing over her face. "You came back," she whispered. "Of course I did," he said hoarsely. "Now move." He cut her free, helping her to her feet. She winced but nodded, leaning heavily on him as they stumbled into the hall. Gunfire cracked outside, reinforcements. "We have to split," Nash said, pressing the small USB drive into her hand, the one loaded with enough evidence to destroy her father's empire. "You get this to someone who will blow it wide open. Press, law enforcement, anyone." "But you," she started. "I will buy you time," he said. "You have to go." Tears filled her eyes. She hesitated, but then turned and ran into the mist. Nash turned toward the sound of heavy footsteps. 3 men rounded the corner, guns raised. Nash dove for cover, bullets sparking off the walls. He fired back with a pistol he had lifted earlier, but he was outgunned. A bullet grazed his side, pain searing through him. He stumbled back, blood soaking into his shirt. This was it. Sirens cut through the air, loud and sharp. Police cruisers burst onto the scene, officers pouring out, shouting commands. The men hesitated, then bolted into the ruins. Nash slumped against the wall, gasping for breath. 2 deputies rushed toward him, weapons drawn. "Easy," Nash croaked. "I am the good guy." One of them knelt, checking his wound. In the distance, he spotted Tessa near a patrol car, the USB clutched tightly in her hand, her face lifted to the cloudy sky. Nash allowed himself a faint smile. They had done it. Against every odd, they had survived. The town of Clearwater Bay was the kind of place that felt untouched by time. The salt air carried the scent of the ocean through narrow streets, lined with weather-worn houses, their roofs faded and softened by decades of sun and storms. Waves rolled lazily against the shore, seagulls crying out overhead. In the middle of it all, tucked between a grove of wind-bent pines and the endless blue of the ocean, stood a small, hand-built cabin. The wood was rough, the paint peeling in spots, but it stood sturdy and proud, a testament to new beginnings. Inside, Nash Walker and Tessa Reed were building a life. They had taken the broken pieces of who they were and shaped them into something whole, something strong. There was no more running, no more fear. Only the slow, steady rhythm of days spent healing and growing together. Mornings were quiet now. Nash would rise early, the sun still stretching over the horizon, and brew a pot of strong coffee while Tessa scribbled notes in a battered leather journal she had found at a flea market. He had once been a man who saw each day as a burden to survive. Now he savored every small moment, the warmth of Tessa's laughter drifting from the kitchen, the soft hum of her voice as she sang along to old songs on the radio, the simple act of sharing a meal made with their own hands. Tessa had transformed too. The girl who once lived behind walls of luxury and loneliness now found joy in the smallest things, tending to a tiny garden she had coaxed to life from the rocky soil, or helping Nash, replace a stubborn carburetor in the shop out back. There was strength in her now, a quiet, unshakable core built from everything she had survived. Neither of them wore masks anymore. There were no more secrets between them, no more pretending to be people they were not. In each other, they had found not just refuge, but truth. One evening, as the sky melted into brilliant streaks of orange and pink, Nash and Tessa sat side by side on the porch, a blanket draped over their laps. The waves crashed gently against the shore, a timeless lullaby. Tessa rested her head against Nash's shoulder, her fingers intertwined with his. "If you could go back," she said softly, her voice almost lost to the whisper of the breeze, "if you could change everything, would you still stop for me that day?" Nash turned his head slightly, catching the fading light in her eyes. He smiled, slow and certain. "I would stop for you 1,000 times," he said, "even knowing what it would cost me, even knowing the danger, because Tessa, you are the part of me I never knew was missing." Tessa blinked, and a tear slid down her cheek, but it was not born from sadness. It was a tear of gratitude, of wonder at the sheer immensity of what they had found in each other. She squeezed his hand tighter, unable to find the words. None were needed. They had started over, not just surviving, but thriving. Together, they opened a small garage on the edge of town, naming it Freedom Motors. It was not fancy, but it was theirs, a place where battered old trucks got second chances, and where people, sometimes just as worn and tired, could find a place to start anew. Locals flocked to them, not just for repairs, but for advice, for friendship. Nash and Tessa became fixtures in the community, trusted, respected. No one asked too many questions about their pasts, and they offered no explanations. In Clearwater Bay, who you were mattered less than who you chose to be. On a warm summer night, under a sky exploding with stars, Nash led Tessa down the beach. They walked barefoot in the sand, the cool ocean kissing their toes. He stopped near a driftwood log bleached white by the sun and pulled something from his pocket, a small, simple, silver ring. Tessa stared at it, her heart pounding wildly in her chest. Nash held it out between them, his hand steady. "I do not have much to offer," he said. "No fancy promises, no grand future. Just me, just us. No past, no chains. Only the road ahead. Will you walk it with me?" Tears blurred Tessa's vision as she nodded, unable to speak. Nash slipped the ring onto her finger, and she threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest as laughter and tears mingled into something too big for words. They stood there a long time, holding on to each other, while the universe wheeled its silent dance above them. Later that night, back on the porch of their little cabin, they sat wrapped in each other's arms. The golden light from the window spilled across the porch, painting them in a soft amber glow. Beyond them, the ocean stretched into forever. A shooting star streaked across the sky, a brilliant flash of hope, burning a path through the darkness. Neither of them spoke. They did not need to. In that moment under that endless sky, they knew. No matter how broken the past had been, no matter how long the road ahead, they had found their way home, together. And that was enough. In a world where second chances are rare, Nash and Tessa proved that sometimes the hardest roads lead to the most beautiful destinations. Their journey reminds us that no matter how broken we feel, no matter how far we have fallen, healing is always possible, with courage, with hope, and most importantly, with love. Thank you for joining us on this soul-stirring story. If you believe, like we do, that everyone deserves a chance to start again and find their true home, do not forget to subscribe to Soul Stirring Stories. Here we share real and heartfelt tales that inspire, heal, and remind us all of the resilience of the human spirit. Stay with us for more stories that touch the heart and lift the soul. Until next time, keep believing in second chances.